Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who looks like they don't belong there. Maya-chan had learned to blend in, to become invisible, to let people see only what she wanted them to see. But on that ordinary Tuesday afternoon in the company cafeteria, when three men decided she was an easy target, they were about to discover that appearances can be deadly. What started as workplace bullying was about to become a lesson in why you should never corner someone whose hands are registered as lethal weapons. Maya had spent 8 years as a Navy SEAL, completing missions in places that didn't exist on any map, but her most challenging battle was about to happen right here between the salad bar and the coffee machine. This is the true story of how a quiet software engineer's past collided with her present, and how 30 seconds of violence would expose secrets that were meant to stay buried forever. Maya-chan adjusted her thick-rimmed glasses and pushed a strand of black hair behind her ear as she stared at the computer screen. The fluorescent lights of TechFlow Solutions buzzed overhead, casting a pale glow across her cubicle. To anyone watching, she looked like every other software engineer in the building, quietly focused on debugging code and meeting deadlines. But Maya's fingers moved across the keyboard with a precision that spoke of years spent handling far more dangerous tools than a mouse and keyboard. She had been working at TechFlow for 18 months now, and she had successfully maintained her carefully crafted image as the quiet, unassuming programmer who kept to herself. Her colleagues knew almost nothing about her past, and that was exactly how Maya wanted it. When people asked about her background, she would mention her computer science degree from MIT and quickly change the subject. Nobody questioned why someone with her qualifications was content working at a mid-level tech company in downtown Seattle, making decent but not exceptional money. The truth was that Maya-chan was running from a life she could never fully explain to civilians. 8 years as a Navy SEAL had left her with skills that had no place in corporate America and memories that she fought to suppress every single day. The transition from classified operations in hostile territories to debugging software applications had been jarring, but it was the price she paid for trying to build a normal life. Her real name wasn't even Maya-chan. That identity had been carefully constructed by military intelligence when she left active duty. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell had officially died in a helicopter crash over the Mediterranean, along with the rest of her classified service record. Maya-chan had emerged from that fictional tragedy with a clean background, a new social security number, and a promise from her former commanding officer that her secrets would stay buried as long as she stayed out of trouble. The problem with trying to live a normal life when you've spent years in extraordinary circumstances is that normal starts to feel like a prison. Maya found herself missing the adrenaline, the brotherhood, the sense of purpose that had defined her military career. Writing code for inventory management systems was intellectually challenging, but it lacked the life-or-death stakes that had made her feel truly alive. She glanced at the clock on her computer screen. It was almost noon, which meant the cafeteria would be getting crowded. Maya typically avoided eating lunch during peak hours, preferring to wait until the rush died down. Crowds made her uncomfortable, not because she was antisocial, but because years of tactical training had taught her to constantly assess threats and escape routes. A crowded cafeteria triggered her hypervigilance in ways that exhausted her mentally. But today her stomach was growling loudly enough that her cubicle neighbor, Jeff, had made a joke about it during their morning stand-up meeting. Maya decided to brave the crowds and grab a quick sandwich before the afternoon code review session. She made her way through the maze of cubicles, nodding politely at co-workers who greeted her. Maya had learned to be friendly enough to avoid standing out, but distant enough to discourage deeper relationships. It was a delicate balance that required constant attention. Too friendly, and people would want to hang out after work or invite her to company parties where alcohol might loosen her tongue. Too distant, and she might draw the wrong kind of attention from management or HR. The cafeteria was indeed packed when Maya arrived. The lunch rush was in full swing, with employees from every department clustered around tables, discussing projects and weekend plans. Maya grabbed a tray and joined the line for sandwiches, keeping her head down and her attention focused on the menu board above the counter. That's when she first noticed Marcus Webb watching her. Marcus was a senior project manager in the marketing department, known throughout the company for his aggressive personality and his tendency to treat support staff poorly. He was tall and broad-shouldered, the kind of man who had probably been a high school football player and never quite gotten over the glory days. Maya had heard stories about Marcus from other employees, stories about his temper and his habit of making inappropriate comments to female colleagues. Maya had successfully avoided Marcus during her time at TechFlow, but she could feel his eyes on her now as she moved through the lunch line. When she glanced up, he was standing near the salad bar with two other men she recognized from the marketing department. All three of them were looking at her with expressions that made her instinctively check for the nearest exits. She told herself she was being paranoid. This was a corporate cafeteria, not a hostile foreign country. These were co-workers, not enemy combatants. But the tactical awareness that had kept her alive in Afghanistan and Syria was screaming warnings that she couldn't ignore. Maya paid for her sandwich and looked around for an empty table. Most of the seating was occupied, but she spotted a small table in the corner that would give her a good view of the room and quick access to multiple exits. As she made her way toward it, she noticed that Marcus and his companions had finished getting their food and were following her general direction. She sat down and unwrapped her turkey sandwich, trying to appear calm while mentally cataloging every person in her vicinity. To her left was a table of accountants discussing quarterly reports. To her right, two interns were comparing notes from a morning training session. Behind her, near the windows, a group of senior developers were arguing about programming languages. Everything seemed normal, but Maya's training had taught her that normalcy could be an illusion. The most dangerous attacks often came when targets felt safest. Marcus and his friends found seats at a table about 10 feet away, close enough to watch her, but not close enough to make their intentions obvious. Maya continued eating her sandwich and scrolling through work emails on her phone, but her peripheral vision tracked their every movement. After about 10 minutes, one of Marcus's companions, a younger man named Derek whom Maya recognized from the elevator, stood up and walked toward the coffee station. The route took him directly past Maya's table, and as he passed, he deliberately bumped into her chair. Maya didn't react visibly, but her muscles tensed. In her former life, that kind of contact would have been a signal for potential violence. Here in the corporate world, it was probably just juvenile harassment, but her body responded the same way regardless. Derek returned to his table with his coffee, and Maya heard him say something to Marcus that made all three men laugh. The sound wasn't friendly. It was the kind of laughter that suggested they were planning something unpleasant. Maya finished her sandwich and checked the time. She still had 20 minutes before her next meeting, but staying in the cafeteria was starting to feel like a tactical error. She gathered her things and stood up to leave. That's when Marcus called out to her. "Hey, Maya, right?" His voice carried across the cafeteria, loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. "We were just talking about you." Maya paused, calculating her response. She could pretend not to hear him and keep walking, but that might escalate the situation. She could engage politely and hope to defuse whatever was building, but that might be exactly what he wanted. She turned around slowly, keeping her expression neutral. "Is there something work-related you need to discuss?" Marcus grinned, and Maya immediately recognized the predatory expression. She had seen it on the faces of interrogators, mercenaries, and terrorists in a dozen different countries. It was the look of someone who enjoyed having power over others. Work-related? Not exactly. Marcus stood up, and his two companions followed suit. "We were just wondering about your background. You're pretty mysterious for someone who just writes code." The cafeteria around them had grown quieter. Maya was aware of other employees glancing in their direction, sensing the tension, but not understanding its source. She was also aware that Marcus and his friends had positioned themselves between her and the main exit. "I'm not mysterious," Maya replied evenly. I just prefer to keep my personal and professional lives separate. See, that's what's interesting, Derek chimed in. Most people love talking about themselves. Where they went to school, what they did before this job, where they're from. But you never talk about any of that stuff. The third man, whom Maya didn't recognize, stepped slightly to her left, completing what she now realized was a deliberate formation. They were boxing her in, using the crowd and the layout of the cafeteria to limit her options. Maya's heart rate increased, but her breathing remained steady. Years of training had taught her to channel adrenaline into focus rather than panic. She quickly reassessed her situation. 3 potential hostiles, 2 possible escape routes, approximately 30 civilians in the immediate area who could become collateral damage if this escalated. I think you gentlemen might be reading too much into basic professionalism, Maya said, keeping her voice calm and her hands relaxed at her sides. I should get back to work now. She started to move toward what seemed like the most viable exit, but Marcus stepped into her path. Hold on there, he said, his voice taking on a more aggressive tone. We're not done talking yet. The cafeteria was definitely quieter now. Maya could feel dozens of eyes on them, but she also knew that most corporate employees had no idea how to respond to confrontation. They would watch, maybe record on their phones, but they wouldn't intervene until it was too late. Maya stopped walking and looked directly at Marcus. For just a moment, she let him see past the carefully constructed mask of the mild-mannered software engineer. She let him see the predator that lived beneath the surface. Marcus blinked and took a half-step backward before catching himself. Something in Maya's eyes had triggered his survival instincts, even though his conscious mind didn't understand what it was seeing. I think you're confused about what kind of person I am, Maya said quietly. And I think you should reconsider whatever you're planning to do next. Derek laughed nervously. What's she gonna do? Debug us to death? But Marcus was still staring into Maya's eyes, and Maya could see that some primitive part of his brain was screaming warnings that he didn't want to acknowledge. Listen, sweetheart, he said, his voice slightly less confident than before. We're just being friendly. No need to get all hostile about it. Maya almost smiled. If Marcus thought she was being hostile now, he had no idea what hostile actually looked like. But she was trying to avoid drawing the kind of attention that would force her to find a new identity and a new city. I appreciate your friendliness, she replied, but I really do need to get back to work. She moved toward the exit again, but this time Derek physically blocked her path, putting his hand on her shoulder. That was a mistake. The moment Derek made physical contact, 18 months of carefully maintained civilian behavior evaporated. Maya's training took over before her conscious mind could stop it. She grabbed Derek's wrist with her left hand, twisted it into a control position, and used her right hand to apply pressure to a nerve cluster just above his elbow. Derek dropped to his knees, his face contorting with pain and confusion. What the hell? Maya released him immediately and stepped back, but the damage was done. The entire cafeteria was staring now, and she could hear people fumbling for their phones to record what was happening. Marcus and the third man stared at Derek, who was clutching his arm and looking at Maya like she had just sprouted claws. How did you do that? Marcus demanded. Maya didn't answer. She was too busy calculating how much exposure this incident would create and whether she would need to call her former commanding officer to arrange another new identity. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of backing down, Marcus's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Being shown up by a woman in front of half the company had triggered something in him that overrode his survival instincts. You think you're tough? He snarled, moving closer to Maya. Let's see how tough you are when it's not just one guy. Maya realized with growing dread that this situation was about to escalate far beyond what she could contain with minimal force. Marcus was too angry and too humiliated to walk away, and she was running out of ways to resolve this without revealing exactly how dangerous she could be. She looked around the cafeteria, noting the positions of security cameras, the locations of potential weapons, and the faces of colleagues who would become witnesses to whatever happened next. In a few seconds, She was going to have to make a choice between protecting her cover and protecting herself. Maya took a deep breath and prepared for her carefully constructed new life to come crashing down around her. The cafeteria had gone completely silent. Maya could hear the hum of the ventilation system, the distant sound of traffic from the street below, and the rapid breathing of the three men who had cornered her. She could also hear her own heartbeat, steady and controlled despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Marcus took another step forward, his face red with humiliation and rage. "I asked you a question," he said, his voice low and threatening. "How did you do that to Derek?" Maya glanced at Derek, who was still on his knees, staring at his arm like it had betrayed him. The nerve cluster she had targeted would cause intense pain for several minutes, but no permanent damage. It was a technique designed for subduing hostile civilians without causing injuries that would require explanation in after-action reports. "He grabbed me," Maya said simply. "I reacted defensively." Defensively? The third man, whose name Maya still didn't know, laughed harshly. "You put him on the ground like you were in some kind of action movie." Maya noticed that several employees had pulled out their phones and were recording the confrontation. She also noticed that none of them were calling security or were trying to intervene. In her experience, civilians often froze during violent encounters, becoming spectators rather than participants. It was another reason why she preferred to avoid crowds. "Maybe we should all just calm down and get back to work," Maya suggested, though she knew it was probably too late for de-escalation. Marcus shook his head. "No, I don't think so. I think you owe us an explanation. Normal people don't fight like that." Maya felt a cold knot forming in her stomach. Marcus had inadvertently stumbled onto the exact question she had spent 18 months trying to avoid. Normal people didn't fight like that, and Maya was not normal people. "I took some self-defense classes," she said, which was technically true if you considered 8 years of military combat training to be self-defense classes. "Bullshit," Derek said, finally getting to his feet while still massaging his arm. "That wasn't self-defense. That was like professional level stuff." Maya realized that her options were narrowing rapidly. She could try to bluff her way out of this situation, but Marcus seemed determined to push things to their conclusion. She could walk away and hope they didn't follow, but that would likely result in rumors and investigations that could expose her identity. Or she could end this confrontation quickly and decisively, but that would require revealing capabilities that would raise even more questions. Before she could decide on a course of action, Marcus made the decision for her. "I think our mysterious little programmer is hiding something," he announced to the room. "And I think it's time we found out what it is." He grabbed Maya's wrist, apparently thinking he could manhandle her the same way Derek had tried to do. It was a fatal miscalculation. Maya's response was instantaneous and overwhelming. She broke Marcus's grip with a sharp twist that rotated his arm beyond its natural range of motion, simultaneously stepping into his space and driving her elbow into his solar plexus. As Marcus doubled over, gasping for breath, Maya swept his legs and put him on the ground with a controlled takedown that looked effortless. The entire sequence took less than 3 seconds. The cafeteria erupted in gasps and shouts. Maya heard chairs scraping against the floor as people jumped up to get a better view. She also heard someone calling security on their phone. Maya stood over Marcus, who was lying on the floor, trying to catch his breath. The third man had backed away, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. Derek was staring at Maya like she was an alien creature. "I warned you to reconsider," Maya said quietly. Marcus rolled onto his side, still wheezing. "What the hell are you?" It was exactly the question Maya had been dreading for 18 months. She looked around the cafeteria at the faces of her co-workers, seeing fear, confusion, and fascination in their expressions. There was no way to put this genie back in the bottle. Her cover was blown. But before she could figure out how to respond, someone started clapping. Maya turned toward the sound and saw a man in his 50s standing near the entrance to the cafeteria. He was wearing an expensive suit and had the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Maya didn't recognize him, but something about his presence made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. "Outstanding," the man said as he approached. "I haven't seen technique that clean since I left the teams." Maya's blood ran cold. The teams was military slang for special operations units. This man knew exactly what he was looking at. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Maya said carefully. The man smiled. "No misunderstanding at all. You're Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, formerly of SEAL Team 6. Or you were before you died in that helicopter crash." The cafeteria was completely silent now. Even Marcus had stopped groaning. Maya felt like the floor had just dropped out from under her feet. "I'm Maya Chun," she said. "I think you have me confused with someone else." "No confusion," the man replied. "I'm Colonel James Harrison, retired. I helped arrange your new identity after Kandahar. We need to talk." Maya's mind raced. She didn't recognize Harrison's name, but that didn't mean anything. Her extraction from military life had involved several layers of handlers and cover stories. But how had he found her, and what did he want? "I don't know what you're talking about," Maya said, still hoping to maintain some semblance of her cover story. Harrison pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. It displayed what looked like a classified military file with her real photo and service record. 18 confirmed kills, 3 silver stars, and a Medal of Honor for that business in Syria. "Very impressive record, Lieutenant." Maya felt the walls closing in around her. Everyone in the cafeteria could hear Harrison's words, and she could see the shock on their faces as they processed what they were learning about their quiet coworker. "That person doesn't exist anymore," Maya said firmly. "She does today," Harrison replied. "We have a situation that requires her specific skill set." Maya almost laughed. "I'm retired." "Nobody retires from our line of work," Harrison said. "They just take extended leave." Marcus had struggled to his feet and was staring at Maya with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "Your military?" Maya corrected. "Past tense. Special forces," Derek added, apparently having overheard enough of Harrison's comments to piece together the basics. Maya realized that trying to maintain her cover story was pointless now. Too many people had seen too much, and Harrison's appearance had blown her carefully constructed identity completely apart. "Why are you here?" she asked Harrison. "Because 3 days ago, someone leaked classified information about Operation Blackwater," Harrison said. "Information that only 5 people in the world had access to. 3 of them are dead. One of them is you, and one of them has gone missing." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Operation Blackwater had been her final mission before leaving active duty. It had involved the covert infiltration of a terrorist stronghold in Syria to retrieve intelligence about planned attacks on American soil. The operation had been successful, but it had also been classified at the highest levels because it had involved actions that violated international law. "Who's missing?" Maya asked. "Captain David Torres, your former team leader." Maya's chest tightened. Torres had been like a brother to her during their years working together. He had also been the one person who knew about her struggles with PTSD and her decision to leave military life behind. "Maybe he just wanted to disappear," Maya suggested. "Like I did." Harrison shook his head. "He's not hiding. He's been taken. And whoever took him is using the Blackwater intel to target former team members." Maya felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. It was the same feeling she had experienced before every dangerous mission, the knowledge that other people's lives depended on her actions. "How do you know he was taken?" Harrison showed her another image on his phone. It was a surveillance photo of Torres being forced into a vehicle by 2 unidentified men. This was taken outside his apartment in Virginia 48 hours ago. Maya studied the image, noting the positions of the attackers and the visible injuries on Torres's face. This wasn't a simple abduction. It looked like the work of professionals. "Who's behind it?" "We're still investigating," Harrison said. "But we think it's connected to the targets from Blackwater. Some of them survived, and they've had 3 years to plan their revenge." Maya looked around the cafeteria, suddenly aware that her coworkers were still watching and listening to every word. Her quiet life as a software engineer was over, but she wasn't sure she was ready to return to her old life as a killer. "I can't help you," she said finally. "I'm not that person anymore." Harrison's expression hardened. "Those men you just put down would disagree. You can pretend to be a civilian, Lieutenant, but you can't pretend to be helpless. Torres saved your life in Syria. Don't you owe him the same?" Maya remembered the night Harrison was referring to. She had been pinned down by enemy fire during the extraction, and Torres had risked everything to get her out. She wouldn't be alive now if not for his actions. "This isn't the place for this conversation," Maya said. "Actually, I think it is," Harrison replied. "Because in about 10 minutes, this building is going to be crawling with reporters. Someone in this room has already uploaded video of your little demonstration to social media, and it's starting to go viral. Your cover is blown whether you help us or not." Maya pulled out her phone and quickly checked social media. Harrison was right. Video of her takedown of Marcus was already circulating on Twitter and Instagram with captions like "Corporate Ninja destroys office bully" and "When IT support knows Kung Fu." "Damn," she muttered. "The only question now is whether you're going to help us find Torres, or whether you're going to spend the rest of your life running from both the media and whoever took him." Maya looked at Marcus, who was still staring at her like she was a dangerous animal. She looked at Derek and the third man, both of whom had backed away to a safe distance. She looked at her co-workers, who were recording everything with their phones. Her carefully constructed normal life was over. Maya Chun, the software engineer, was about to become a very public figure, and there was no going back. But maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. For 18 months, she had felt like she was slowly suffocating in her civilian life. The work was boring, the relationships were superficial, and she woke up every morning feeling like she was wearing someone else's skin. Torres was in danger, and she had the skills to help him. It was the first time since leaving the military that she had encountered a problem that actually required her unique capabilities. "What do you need me to do?" she asked Harrison. Harrison smiled. "I need you to remember who you really are." Maya took a deep breath and felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. For the first time in 18 months, she wasn't pretending to be someone else. "My name is Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell," she announced to the room, "and I have work to do." 2 hours later, Maya sat in the back of a black SUV, speeding through downtown Seattle traffic. She had traded her corporate attire for tactical gear that Harrison's people had provided, and for the first time in 18 months, she felt like herself again. The weight of the Sig Sauer pistol on her hip and the familiar pressure of body armor across her chest were oddly comforting. Harrison sat across from her, briefing her on intelligence that had been gathered since Torres's disappearance. The interior of the SUV was equipped with secure communications gear and multiple monitors displaying satellite imagery and surveillance feeds. "The leak happened 72 hours ago," Harrison explained, pulling up a timeline on one of the screens. "Someone accessed the classified Blackwater files from a terminal at the Pentagon. 48 hours later, Torres was taken. 24 hours after that, we intercepted communications suggesting that other team members are being targeted." Maya studied the intelligence reports. "How many of the original team are still alive? Besides you and Torres?" "3 others. Lieutenant Commander Jackson is deployed with the 6th Fleet in the Mediterranean. Master Chief Rodriguez is running training operations at Coronado, and Sergeant Williams is working private security in Afghanistan. Have they been warned? Jackson and Rodriguez are in secure locations. We're still trying to reach Williams." Harrison paused. "But you were the priority target." Maya looked up from the reports. "Why me?" "Because of what happened in the compound. You were the one who took out their leader." Maya remembered the night in question with perfect clarity, despite her efforts to forget it. The terrorist compound had been located in a mountainous region of Syria, and the intelligence suggested they were planning coordinated attacks on American embassies across the Middle East. Maya's team had infiltrated the facility during a sandstorm, using the weather as cover for their approach. The mission had been going according to plan until they discovered that the compound contained not just terrorists, but also civilian hostages, including several American aid workers who had been kidnapped months earlier. The rules of engagement had suddenly become much more complicated. Maya had been tasked with securing the computer room where the intelligence was stored, but when she arrived, she found the terrorist leader, a man named Hassan al-Rashid, executing hostages one by one. Without hesitation, she had engaged him in close-quarters combat, ultimately killing him with her bare hands to avoid the noise of gunfire that might alert other guards. It had been necessary, but it had also been personal. Al-Rashid had looked her in the eyes as he died, and she had seen something in his expression that suggested their conflict was far from over. Al-Rashid had a brother, Maya said. Khalil. We never found him. Harrison nodded. Khalil al-Rasif. He disappeared after the raid, but intelligence suggests he's been building a network focused specifically on revenge against your team. 3 years is a long time to hold a grudge. Not when your entire family has been dishonored by a woman, Harrison replied. Cultural factors make this particularly personal for him. Maya felt a familiar surge of anger. She had encountered that attitude before during her military service, men who couldn't accept being defeated by a female soldier. It was one of the many reasons she had been eager to leave that world behind. So what's the plan? Harrison pulled up another screen showing a map of the Pacific Northwest. We've traced some of the communications to this area. Khalil's people are somewhere within a 100-mile radius of Seattle. They probably chose this location because they knew you were here. How do they find me? We're still investigating that. Your identity was supposed to be completely secure. Maya felt a chill. If her cover had been compromised, it meant that either someone in the intelligence community was helping Khalil, or his resources were far more sophisticated than they had assumed. The SUV pulled into an industrial area south of Seattle, stopping in front of a nondescript warehouse. Harrison led Maya inside, where she was surprised to find a fully equipped tactical operations center. Banks of computers lined the walls, and several technicians were monitoring communications intercepts and satellite feeds. Welcome to our temporary base of operations, Harrison said. We've been tracking Khalil's network for 6 months, but Torres's abduction gave us our first real lead. A young woman with short blonde hair approached them, carrying a tablet loaded with surveillance imagery. Colonel, we've got movement at the target location. Harrison introduced the woman as Agent Sarah Kim from the CIA. She had been tracking Khalil's financial networks and communication patterns since the Blackwater leak was discovered. Show her what we found, Harrison ordered. Kim led them to a large monitor displaying aerial footage of a remote compound in the Cascade Mountains. The imagery showed several buildings surrounded by high fencing and multiple guard positions. This property was purchased 8 months ago through a shell company, Kim explained. We've identified at least 12 individuals on the premises, including several who match known associates of Khalil al-Rashid. Maya studied the layout carefully, automatically noting approaches, choke points, and potential escape routes. Have you confirmed that Torres is there? Thermal imaging suggests there's at least one person being held in the basement of the main building, Kim said. The signature matches Torres's physical profile. What's the timeline for extraction? Harrison pulled up another display showing weather patterns. There's a storm system moving in tonight. Heavy rain and low visibility. Perfect cover for an insertion. Maya nodded. Night operations in bad weather were dangerous, but they also provided significant tactical advantages for a small, well-trained team. What kind of support do I have? That's the problem, Harrison admitted. Officially, this operation doesn't exist. We can't use regular military assets without congressional approval, and we can't get congressional approval without revealing classified details about Blackwater. Maya understood the implications immediately. So this is off the books. Completely. You'll have Kim for intelligence support and 2 other operatives for backup, but that's it. No air support, no medical evacuation, no cavalry coming over the hill if things go wrong. Maya had run plenty of unsupported operations during her time with the SEALs, but she had always known that extraction was possible if everything went to hell. This mission would be different. Who are the other operatives? Harrison gestured toward two men who had been quietly checking equipment near the back of the warehouse. Maya recognized the type immediately. Former Special Forces, probably Delta or Rangers, now working private contracts. Thompson and Garcia, Harrison said. Both solid operators. They'll handle perimeter security while you go in after Torres. Maya walked over to introduce herself. Thompson was tall and lean, with the weathered look of someone who had spent years in hostile environments. Garcia was shorter and more compact, but Maya could see the alertness in his eyes that marked him as a professional. "Ma'am," Thompson said respectfully, "we've heard about your work in Syria. It's an honor to be working with you." Maya appreciated the professionalism, but she also knew that respect had to be earned in the field, not inherited from past accomplishments. "Call me Sarah," she said, "and let's focus on getting Torres out alive." The next several hours were spent planning the operation in detail. Maya studied every piece of intelligence they had about the compound, memorizing guard rotations, building layouts, and communication protocols. She also spent time checking and rechecking her equipment, ensuring that every piece of gear was properly fitted and functional. As night fell and the predicted storm began to intensify, Maya found herself thinking about her peaceful life as Maya Chun. This morning she had been worried about debugging code and meeting project deadlines. Now she was preparing to assault a fortified position held by international terrorists. The transition felt surreal, but also strangely natural. For 18 months, she had been trying to convince herself that she was happy with her civilian life, but the truth was that she had been slowly dying inside. The corporate world offered safety and stability, but it also offered a kind of spiritual death for someone who had been trained to operate at the highest levels of human capability. Kim approached her as she was loading ammunition into her tactical vest. "How are you feeling about this?" Maya considered the question carefully. "Scared," she admitted, "but also more alive than I've felt in a long time." "Do you think you could do it? It's been 18 months since your last operation." Maya smiled grimly. "It's like riding a bicycle. Some things you never forget." At 2,200 hours, the team loaded into a helicopter that Harrison had acquired through unofficial channels. The aircraft was a civilian model that had been modified with military-grade avionics and sound-dampening equipment. It would get them close to the target without appearing on official flight plans. As they lifted off into the storm, Maya felt the familiar pre-mission calm settling over her. All the planning was done, all the equipment was checked, and all the variables had been considered. Now it was just a matter of execution. She looked out the window at the lights of Seattle disappearing behind them. Somewhere down there, her coworkers at TechFlow were probably still talking about the incident in the cafeteria. By tomorrow, the entire world would know that Maya Chun had been a fiction, and Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell was very much alive. But first, she had to save Torres. The helicopter flew low through the mountain passes, using the storm and the terrain to avoid radar detection. Maya watched the GPS display, counting down the miles to the target. In 30 minutes, she would be back in her element, operating in the shadows where life and death decisions were measured in split seconds. She thought about Torres probably imprisoned and possibly tortured in the basement of the compound. He had risked everything to save her in Syria, and now it was her turn to return the favor. Maya checked her weapons one final time and prepared to become the ghost that had terrified enemies across 3 continents. The hunt was about to begin. The helicopter touched down in a clearing 2 miles from the target compound, its rotors barely audible above the howling wind and driving rain. Maya and her team quickly unloaded their gear and moved into the tree line as the aircraft disappeared back into the storm. Within seconds, the sound of its engines was swallowed by the weather, leaving them alone in the darkness. Maya activated her night vision goggles and surveyed the terrain ahead. The forest was dense with Douglas fir and cedar, providing excellent concealment, but also limiting visibility and movement. The rain was so heavy that it was creating streams where none had existed an hour earlier. "Comms check." Maya whispered into her throat microphone. Thompson here, signal clear, came the immediate response. Garcia, good copy, followed a moment later. Kim here, Overwatch, is online. Added their intelligence support from the operations center. Maya checked her GPS and confirmed their position. The compound was located in a valley approximately 1 mile northeast of their current location. According to the intelligence briefings, the facility was surrounded by a 12-foot chain-link fence topped with razor wire, with guard towers at each corner and roving patrols around the perimeter. Moving to Phase Line Alpha, Maya reported, beginning her approach through the forest. Thompson and Garcia would be taking different routes to their assigned Overwatch positions, but Maya was moving alone toward the main target building. Solo infiltration was risky, but it also offered advantages in terms of stealth and speed that a larger team couldn't match. As she moved through the woods, Maya felt her training taking over. Every step was placed carefully to avoid breaking branches or disturbing the forest floor. Every pause was calculated to provide maximum concealment while maintaining visual contact with potential threats. Her breathing was controlled, her movements were fluid, and her mind was completely focused on the mission. After 30 minutes of careful movement, Maya reached the edge of the forest and could see the compound below. The intelligence reports had been accurate. The facility consisted of 4 main buildings arranged around a central courtyard, with guard towers providing overlapping fields of fire across the approaches. Maya counted 8 visible guards, though she knew there were probably more inside the buildings. The storm was working in her favor, as the guards were huddled in their positions trying to stay dry rather than conducting active surveillance. Overwatch Alpha, in position. Thompson reported from his location on the ridge to the north. Overwatch Beta set. Garcia added from his position covering the western approach. Visual confirmation of target building, Maya whispered. Beginning infiltration. Maya had identified several potential entry points during her study of the compound. The basement where Torres was being held could be accessed through a service entrance on the south side of the main building, but reaching it would require crossing 50 meters of open ground while avoiding the guard towers. She waited for the roving patrol to complete its circuit, then moved quickly down the hillside toward the fence. The rain was making so much noise that her footsteps were completely masked, and the guard in the towers were more focused on staying warm than watching for infiltrators. Maya reached the fence and immediately began working on the chain link with a small cutting tool. The steel was wet and slippery, but she had practiced this exact technique hundreds of times during training. Within 3 minutes, she had created an opening large enough to crawl through. As she moved across the compound toward the target building, Maya's radio crackled with Kim's voice. Multiple vehicles approaching from the east. Looks like reinforcements. Maya cursed silently. The intelligence had suggested that the compound's normal strength was 12 to 15 personnel, but if reinforcements were arriving, the odds were about to get much worse. How many vehicles? She whispered. 3 SUVs, approximately 12 additional personnel, Kim reported. Maya was now halfway across the courtyard, committed to the infiltration, but facing a rapidly deteriorating tactical situation. She had to make a choice: abort the mission and try again later, or accelerate the timeline and hope she could extract Torres before the reinforcements arrived. She thought about Torres, probably beaten and tortured, waiting for rescue that might never come. She thought about Khalil al-Rashid, using her former teammate as bait to draw her into exactly this kind of trap. And she thought about the promise she had made to herself never to leave a fellow soldier behind. Continue mission, she decided. Accelerate timeline. Maya sprinted the remaining distance to the service entrance, abandoning stealth for speed. The door was locked, but she quickly defeated the mechanism with a lock-picking tool that was standard equipment for special operations. The basement of the building was dark and smelled of dampness and fear. Maya activated her night vision and began moving through a maze of corridors, checking each room systematically. Most were empty storage areas, but she could hear voices from somewhere deeper in the building. Following the sound, Maya eventually reached a heavy steel door with multiple locks. She could hear someone moving inside, along with what sounded like labored breathing. "Therese," she whispered through the door. "It's Sarah. Can you hear me, Sarah?" The voice was weak, but unmistakably Torres. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Saving your ass," Maya replied as she began working on the locks. "Can you move?" "I think so. They've been asking questions about Blackwater, but they haven't broken anything important yet." Maya got the door open and found Torres chained to a chair in the middle of the small room. He was bruised and bloody, but his eyes were alert and focused. He was definitely mobile. "Hold still," Maya said as she began cutting through his restraints. "We need to move fast. Reinforcements are arriving." As she freed Torres from the chains, Maya's radio erupted with urgent communications from her Overwatch team. "Contact north," Thompson reported. "Multiple hostiles moving toward the main building." "Contact west," Garcia added. "I count at least 6 moving to surround the compound." Maya helped Torres to his feet and handed him a spare sidearm. "Can you fight?" Torres tested his mobility and nodded grimly. "Let's go." They moved back through the basement corridors, but as they approached the service entrance, Maya could hear footsteps and voices in the courtyard above. Their extraction route was compromised. "Kim, I need alternate egress," Maya whispered. "Checking thermal imagery," Kim replied. "There's a drainage tunnel that runs from the basement to the forest. Southeast corner of the building." Maya and Torres moved through the basement until they found the tunnel entrance. It was a concrete pipe about 4 feet in diameter, just large enough for them to crawl through. The tunnel was partially flooded from the storm, but it represented their best chance of escape. "After you," Maya told Torres. They began crawling through the tunnel, moving as quickly as possible while trying to avoid making noise that might carry to the surface. The water was ice cold, and the tunnel was completely dark, but Maya knew it was leading them away from the compound and towards safety. Behind them, Maya could hear shouting and the sound of doors being kicked in as Khalil's men discovered Torres's empty cell. It wouldn't be long before they figured out the escape route and began pursuing them through the tunnel. After what felt like hours but was probably only 10 minutes, Maya saw a faint gray light ahead that indicated the tunnel exit. She and Torres emerged into a drainage ditch in the forest, soaked and exhausted but alive. "Extraction Point Alpha," Maya reported to her team. "Package secured." "Roger," Thompson replied. "We're moving to support." But as Maya and Torres began making their way through the forest toward the helicopter landing zone, Maya's radio crackled with an unwelcome voice. "Lieutenant Mitchell." The accent was unmistakably Middle Eastern. "This is Khalil al-Rashid." Maya stopped moving and gestured for Torres to take cover behind a large tree. Somehow Khalil had accessed their communications frequency. "I am listening," Maya replied. "You have taken my brother's killer from me," Khalil said. "But this is not over. I know where you work, I know where you live, and I know the identities of everyone you care about." Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold rain. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand that there is nowhere you can hide," Khalil continued. "You may have rescued your friend, but you cannot rescue everyone. Someday, when you least expect it, I will take from you what you took from me." The transmission ended, leaving Maya staring into the dark forest with the growing realization that this mission might have saved Torres, but it had also escalated a conflict that could follow her for the rest of her life. "Sarah," Torres said quietly, "we need to move." Maya nodded and began leading them toward the extraction point, but her mind was racing. Khalil was right that she couldn't protect everyone. Her co-workers at Tech Flow, her neighbors in Seattle, anyone who had become part of Maya Chen's life was now potentially at risk because Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell had returned from the dead. 20 minutes later, they reached the clearing where the helicopter was waiting. Thompson and Garcia had already arrived and were providing security while the aircraft prepared for immediate departure. As the helicopter lifted off into the storm, Maya looked back at the lights of the compound, now swarming with vehicles and searchlights. Torres was safe, and the mission had been successful, but she knew that this was just the beginning of a much larger conflict. Khalil al-Rashid was out there somewhere, planning his revenge, and Maya was going to have to decide whether to keep running or to end this threat once and for all. The quiet life of Maya-chan was officially over. The question now was what Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell was going to do about it. 3 weeks later, Maya stood in the abandoned office space that had once housed her cubicle at TechFlow Solutions. The building had been evacuated after the second bombing attempt, and the company had relocated to a secure facility across town. Maya's former workplace was now a crime scene, with FBI tape blocking off areas where Khalil's operatives had planted explosive devices. The media had dubbed her the corporate ninja, and her story had become international news. Video footage of the cafeteria incident had been viewed over 50 million times, and investigative reporters were digging into every aspect of her military service and civilian life. Her carefully constructed identity as Maya-chan had become the subject of documentaries, think pieces, and conspiracy theories. But Maya was no longer hiding. She walked through the empty corridors where she had once pretended to be just another software engineer, remembering the suffocating feeling of constantly maintaining a false identity. The contrast with how she felt now was striking. For the first time since leaving the military, she felt like herself again, dangerous but also free. Torres appeared beside her, moving with the silent precision that marked him as a fellow operator. His injuries from captivity had healed, but the experience had left him changed. Like Maya, he had been living under an assumed identity since leaving active duty, but Khalil's actions had forced both of them back into the open. Anything? Maya asked. Torres shook his head. No active surveillance. If Khalil's people are watching, they're better than our equipment can detect. They were using the abandoned TechFlow building as bait, hoping to draw Khalil or his operatives into a controlled environment where they could be eliminated. For 3 weeks, Maya had been living her life openly, appearing on television interviews and maintaining a highly visible public schedule. She was gambling that Khalil's desire for revenge would override his tactical judgment. So far, the gamble wasn't paying off. Maybe he's smarter than we thought, Torres suggested. Maya nodded. Khalil had proven to be a sophisticated adversary, capable of long-term planning and operational security that rivaled professional intelligence agencies. His threats hadn't been idle boasting. In the weeks since Torres' rescue, Khalil's network had attempted attacks on 2 other former SEAL team members, forcing all of them to accept protective custody. Maya's phone buzzed with a message from Colonel Harrison. The CIA had been monitoring communications intercepts and financial transactions related to Khalil's network, but the intelligence was fragmented and often contradictory. What does Harrison say? Torres asked. Maya read the message. Possible contact in Vancouver. Khalil may have crossed the border into Canada. It made tactical sense. Vancouver was close enough to Seattle to allow continued operations, but far enough away to complicate American law enforcement efforts. Canada also had a large Middle Eastern population where Khalil's people could blend in more easily. Road trip, Torres suggested. Before Maya could answer, her phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but something about the timing made her suspicious. Answer it, Torres said, already activating recording equipment they had set up throughout the building. Maya put the call on speaker. This is Sarah, Lieutenant Mitchell. Khalil's voice was unmistakable. You have been making quite a spectacle of yourself. Maya felt her pulse quicken, but kept her voice steady. I figured if you wanted to find me, I might as well make it easy. Khalil laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Your former colleagues did not make it so easy. They died badly. Maya's blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Lieutenant Commander Jackson. Master Chief Rodriguez. Did you think your government could protect them forever? Torres was already pulling up secure communications on his laptop, trying to verify Khalil's claims. Within seconds, he had confirmation that both men had been found dead in what authorities were calling terrorist attacks. You bastard, Maya said quietly. They paid the price for your actions in Syria, Khalil replied. As will everyone you care about. Your former co-workers, your neighbors, anyone who was part of your false life, as Maya Chin. Maya felt rage building in her chest, but she forced herself to stay focused. Khalil was trying to provoke her into making an emotional mistake. What do you want? She asked. I want you to understand what it feels like to lose everything, Khalil said. My brother died because of you. Now you will watch everyone around you die because of who you are. Your brother died because he was executing innocent civilians, Maya replied. I'd do it again. Yes, Khalil said softly. I know you would. That is what makes this so satisfying. The line went dead, leaving Maya staring at the phone with a mixture of fury and calculation. Khalil wasn't just seeking revenge. He was trying to destroy her psychologically by forcing her to choose between her own safety and the safety of innocent people. Sarah, Torres said carefully, we need to evacuate anyone who might be at risk. Maya nodded, but she was thinking beyond immediate protective measures. As long as Khalil remained alive and free, he would continue targeting people connected to her. Protective custody might save some of them, but it wouldn't save all of them, and it wouldn't end the threat. No, Maya said finally. We're not playing defense anymore. Torres looked at her with understanding. They had both been soldiers long enough to recognize when the time for half measures was over. Maya pulled up the intelligence files that Harrison had provided about Khalil's network. For weeks, she had been studying his patterns and methods, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited. Khalil was careful and professional, but he was also driven by emotion, which meant he would eventually make mistakes. He's been planning this for 3 years, Maya said, pointing to financial records showing payments to various operatives across North America. But look at the timing of these transactions. Everything accelerated after the Blackwater leak. Torres studied the data. He wasn't ready. The leak forced him to move before his network was fully established. Maya nodded, which means he's improvising now. And people make mistakes when they improvise. She pulled up satellite imagery of Vancouver, focusing on areas with significant Middle Eastern populations where Khalil's people might be hiding. There were dozens of potential locations, but one stood out. This warehouse, Maya said, pointing to a building in an industrial area near the port. It was purchased by the same shell company that bought the compound in the Cascades. Torres enhanced the image, noting the security features and the lack of legitimate business activity. Looks like another safe house. Maya made a decision that would have been impossible for her 18 months ago, when she was still trying to live as Maya Chun. She was going to end this threat permanently, regardless of the consequences. Get Harrison on the line, she told Torres. We're going to need equipment. What kind of operation are you planning? Maya looked at the satellite image of the warehouse, calculating approaches and escape routes with the same precision she had once used to plan missions in hostile territory. The kind that ends with Khalil al-Rashid dead. 2 hours later, Maya was sitting in the back of another unmarked vehicle, this time heading north toward the Canadian border. Harrison had provided equipment and intelligence support, but officially the United States government had no knowledge of what was about to happen in Vancouver. Maya had changed out of her civilian clothes and back into full tactical gear. The familiar weight of body armor and weapons felt like coming home after a long journey. She was no longer Maya Chun, the software engineer who had tried to live a normal life. She was Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, and she was done running. As they crossed the border using false identification that Harrison had arranged, Maya thought about the path that had led her here. 3 weeks ago, she had been a corporate drone trying to forget who she really was. Now she was planning an assassination that would either end the threat against her or get her killed in the attempt. But for the first time since leaving the military, Maya felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The warehouse appeared ahead in the distance, dark except for a few security lights around the perimeter. Somewhere inside that building was Khalil al-Rashid, the man who had turned her quiet civilian life into a nightmare. Maya checked her weapons one final time and prepared to finish what had started in a Syrian compound 3 years ago. Some wars never really end. They just go underground and wait for the right moment to surface again. But Maya had learned something important during her 18 months as a civilian. You can't run from who you really are forever. Tonight, the running stopped. Maya stepped out of the vehicle and disappeared into the shadows surrounding the warehouse, moving with the deadly grace of America's most elite warrior. Khalil al-Rashid had wanted to face the woman who killed his brother. He was about to get his wish.